Welcome back to your meeting. We're discussing healthcare. My guest is Clayton Samsudin. And if you'd like to email me, you can. My address is info@anchorcapital.co.za. Before I get onto the emails, I just want to make the comment. Before I went off air, I made the comment that the same way as you do an estate and financial plan, I think what's also important, you need to look at all the different components that make up a healthcare plan, although it does form part of your financial plan. But most people have got life insurance. Attached to life insurance could be dreaded disease or critical illness insurance, the payment in the event of a critical illness like a heart attack, stroke, anything like that. Then you've got to think about, if I can't earn an income, do I have disability insurance? What type of disability insurance have I got? Have I got income replacement, which means after a period of time, if I can't work, they'll replace my monthly income? Have I got capital payment? If I've got a capital payment, which means a lump sum, what is the definition? Own or similar occupation, or any occupation? Very important. So I think what you need to do is, when you're looking at healthcare and you're looking at a medical aid, you need to incorporate all your aspects and understand. And the biggest understanding is people who are both in retirement, big problem, because we see these increases, and you think about what other costs you've got. This is your biggest expense. And people who are reaching retirement need to have a plan. How am I going to actually fund in retirement separately to anything else? I have to, my healthcare program, need to set aside amounts of money, and you need to talk to both your financial planner and your healthcare broker. And Janine in Morningside says, I never saw anything in the budget about NHI and the required funding. Have there been any recent developments? And as a pensioner, would I still be able to write off certain of my medical expenses against my income when NHI is finally implemented? I think, just to put it, a pensioner has a certain formula, a lot better than anyone under retirement.
Correct.
Where there's a deduction, a certain percentage. I won't go because it's quite a complicated percent. But anything in NHI in the budget, and her concern is, if NHI comes in, will she still be able to write it off against tax?
So the first question is, sadly, there's been no progress made really. The only progress is there was a court ruling in September last year that certain of the provisions in the NHI bill is unconstitutional. So we can now expect that kind of scenario causing delays. Most recently, there were around, I think, 44 new appointments in the Department of Health to try and, put some momentum behind the implementation of NHI. So that's probably the most recent scenarios. But to the email, unfortunately not, because the tax credits we just spoke about and the additional medical scheme tax credit that you get for the percentage of claims that's not covered by the medical scheme, that's going to be funneled to the NHI. So again, it does become a scenario. So if you take a member, let's say an employed person with probably 3 dependents, their tax credit would be 1,000 Rand, 900 and some odd. So they'll be losing that contribution towards the medical aid when NHI comes in.
Additional tax. And pensioners?
Same thing. So they'll lose the tax credit.
People who are really, I think about people who really, their medical aid costs and additional costs can run into thousands, hundreds of thousands.
Correct.
Johan in Blobergstrand says, what sort of benefits do medical schemes provide for mental health, and do some of these benefits form part of prescribed minimum benefits?
Yes, so mental health, similar to...
A big problem, isn't it?
A big problem, correct.
Because, the stress, and I've always believed that stress is a real killer. So people are stressed, money stressed, a whole lot of other issues. We don't need to talk about all the problems of South Africa, but generally people are stressed.
Absolutely, but look, the two important things from a private healthcare point of view that we must commend the particular sector is the benefits that's provided for mental health as well as for maternity. It's not just mental health. So what medical schemes have done across the board is really enhance the benefit structure that they pay from risk, as you just mentioned now. So on the mental health, members on the majority of schemes would have access to a minimum of 12 consultations that's not paid for from their savings in the event of, really stress, anxiety disorders. So at least they could access someone to talk to in that event. And if they then apply for prescribed minimum benefits under certain procedure codes, ICD-10 codes, they'll be able to get consultations plus medication. So it's important to know that even if you're on a plan that doesn't have a medical savings account or you've depleted it, you still have access to that mental health benefit.
Is that a condition of all medical aids?
The majority of them have that. Some of them go up to 15 consults in a year. Sometimes some of them are 12. So, I mean, just think about it. A member could actually see a psychologist once a month. And I think that's really great benefits, and it's a good question.
I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. You know,
Correct.
a lot of people who feel stressed and feel they'd like to talk to someone just say I can't afford it. I don't think they're even aware that if they've got a medical aid, there's an opportunity.
There is.
Again, as I made the point, a reason to have a broker on your medical aid. Clayton is here. He's available. He's really. He's been with me now. How many years have you been on the program, Clayton?
From around, I think, 2009.
Okay, that's 14 years, and I've got no vested interest whatsoever. I use Clayton because Clayton's got an enormous amount of knowledge. Janine in Simonstown says, what is the role of the Board of Healthcare Funders and who do they represent?
So the Board of Healthcare Funders...
They've got teeth.
They do. So it's a non-profit, first of all, and the majority of medical schemes are actually their members and managed healthcare organizations. So they're the advocacy group on behalf of the private healthcare system. And they kind of lobby for changes to the Medical Schemes Act and a host of other things. But a great organization.
So do they represent medical aids, not individuals?
No. So of course, because by virtue of the fact that members are of a medical scheme, are the actual medical schemes. So, and medical schemes are not for profit either. So you could almost say they're an extension of the advocacy of members' rights schemes, medical schemes, managed healthcare organization, and so forth.
And a big organization?
Yeah, massive organization. I don't know the exact figures, but I can tell you an overwhelming majority of the private healthcare medical schemes are members of the BHF, the Board of Healthcare Funders.
Sue in Morningside says, I'm a teacher, but when it comes to my medical aid, I'm unable to teach myself. How can education of myself and other members be improved to help us decide on which plan one should join?
It's it's a mind.
With Discovery, you need a new degree. You need to go to university. You need to get a bachelor's in medical aids.
So look, Brian. Firstly, I want to say that it's a minefield out there. It's challenging even for qualified advisors to understand. And I think notably it takes you 2 years to just do your apprentice. So you serve a 2 years an apprentice period with the Council of Medical Schemes before becoming fully accredited. So I think that's important to note. But look, I mean, some simple things. Understand the terminology, understand the structure. And I think you can't just read your medical scheme brochure and think your option and think you're okay. You need to go and understand what does prescribed minimum benefits mean. What does chronic disease list mean? What does additional chronic disease list? What does self-payment gap mean? And what does in-scheme benefits? So once you understand those structures, when you pick up a brochure, you'll be able to understand any option really. So here's an example. If you know that you're on a network option, what that should tell you is that, wait a minute, that means I can only go to a hospital within the network for, let's say, planned procedures, but because there's prescribed minimum benefits, I still have access to 27 prescribed minimum chronic conditions, 271 treatment pairs of treatment I can go for. So that gives you an idea of what you can do.
Where? Any hospital?
Any hospital plan. So even if you're on a hospital plan, see, that's what I'm saying. If you understand prescribed minimum benefits as a benefit structure, then you'll know that what I just mentioned now, that 27 chronic conditions is on any medical scheme, whether it's hospital only, whether it's network, whether it's capitation, it doesn't matter. So you will have access to chronic medication. And so those are the things you need to understand. Then you need to know things like asthma, epilepsy is part of that 27, so is COVID. So don't go pay for your asthma medication over the counter or via some other benefit because you don't know that it's one of the PMBs. So I think understanding structure, terminology, that would help.
Difficult one. Zakili says, how does one really do a comparison between medical aids and can one?
So you need a software program. So we all use software programs. Years ago, we worked with a stick file, Brian, with all the brochures of the scheme and the one last year and this year and compared them. But these days we use, of course, software programs. But that doesn't help much because you need to know the schemes. You can't You know, you need to know what you're comparing between, let's say, you know, Bonitas, Momentum, Bestmed, Fedal, Discovery.
But that's the role of a healthcare consultant. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And whatever. I mean, if you're paying a lot less, you're going to be getting a lot less.
Correct.
You know. And Norris in Waverley says, how does one balance the quality of healthcare against affordability? I mean, that is really the biggest question you have.
Look, so Brian, from my point of view, and I'm sure even in your space, you want to importantly cover the major medical cost. So you want to make sure that if you've got a 200,000 Rand operation procedure, that it will be paid for in full. You know, but so that's why I'm saying, so rather ensure that your major medical cover in terms of hospitalization, chronic, and all of those that you covered really appropriately and well, including gap cover. And then if you wanted to compromise in terms of affordability, is to try and self-insure some part of the day-to-day benefits. And that's highly possible with the range of schemes that we have today. So you can have a really comprehensive major medical scheme plan with that provides for 60 chronic conditions, but you can then kind of sacrifice on your day-to-day benefits.
So it's a bit of self-insurance.
That's correct.
Insure for the catastrophe and self-insure for some of the other things. Johan in Johannesburg says, after our last program, you gave a lot of detail about gap cover, and you mentioned certain procedures covered outside of hospitalisation in prosthetics covered under gap cover. Would you like to explain that?
Yeah. So, firstly, again, on similar with gap cover, they also have core plans, meaning low-end plans.
And yeah, and one gap cover is not another. You've got to compare the benefits.
Absolutely.
And so premium, which sounds less, one gap cover paying 150, another one paying 500. They're going to be other benefits.
Absolutely. So yes, there are benefits that gap covers pay out of hospital, so that would be things like scopes and MRIs, where certain co-payments, deductibles is applied. But on the topic of prosthetics, so there's two types: internal, external. External prosthesis, some gap covers provide for wheelchairs and nebulizers and so forth, others don't. So again, it's a selection. You have to make sure that the gap cover complements the medical scheme. Now, when you get to internal prosthesis, so we're talking about sub-limits for a false hip, knee, and so forth, those replacements, schemes have a limit for that. And what gap cover does is they add an additional benefit for that.
Well, anyone on a medical aid is starting to see what I've spoken about over the years, that it is the single rising cost in your monthly and annual budget. There is no doubt it's always going to increase more than the inflation rate. For this reason, ad nauseum, I remind those on healthcare programs to get themselves a registered healthcare broker to evaluate with him whether they're on the right scheme with the right cover and will be able to afford healthcare as they get older. That is usually when you need the cover. I'd like to thank Clayton for joining me this evening.
Pleasure,
it's important to note that our program tonight is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program will once again focus on estate planning. If you need to get hold of me, my details will appear on the screen. Thank you for watching, and good night.